Hello everyone, Kristina Werner here. I'm excited to share with you all of the products that are included in my October 2024 release at Concord and Ninth.com. We have a lot of really fun products for you, including some Christmas, kind of some essentials, some staples, and some really fun layered stencil sets. Let's get into all the product. The pretty Poinsettia stamps and dies are a 6x6 stamp set with coordinating dies. Now this is the stamp set that I have been using to create lots of fun cards, so it doesn't look so hot at the moment. So I'm going to put a graphic on screen so you can see what they look like when they're nice and clean. You can see the designs. But basically you have a bunch of images, including all of your leaves and flowers and berries, plus 4 sentiments. And with the dies, it cuts out every single stamped image. So you can really build bouquets of flowers. I have a few cards to show you. So when I played with this stamp set, I wanted to color the leaves and the flowers a few different ways. So for this one, I used Copic markers to color that in, some really simple coloring. And then for this card and this next one, I actually watercolored them. So for this one, I stamped and then heat embossed in gold and then painted the flowers. You can see how those turned out. I think it's so pretty, nice and simple. And then I had lots of flowers left over after painting and cutting them out. So then I used just one flower, a couple of leaves on a stem and some berries for this really simple card. It's the same gold embossed lines, but much more simple on this card. And then to show the poinsettias without being die cut and without being colored, I created this card where I did the flowers just gold embossed on top of some juniper cardstock. And then I made it look a little bit like a Christmas present by layering 2 shades of red cardstock. And then I used this gift bow die that was included in the September release. I thought it was just the perfect little addition onto this card. So as I go through and show more of the release, you'll see these flowers pop up in a few different places, including, here's an example right here of cutting out the flowers out of colored cardstock and then just coloring sections of them with an alcohol marker. The layered plaid stencil pack is something that I've been wanting to create for a long time. This seemed like the perfect opportunity for it. It's a set of 4 stencils and all of the elements line up perfectly so you can layer them together or keep them on their own. Something to note for all of these stencils is that for some of these, there's a lot of open space and your stencil might want to move around. I found that for the best application and the best use with these stencils, it was worth it to put a little bit of pixie spray on the back of the stencil. I just sprayed it on the back, let it dry, and then went on to use my stencils. If you're unfamiliar with pixie spray, it's a very low tack adhesive meant for stencils, and it just helps your stencil, kind of stick and not want to like move around on your project. It is reusable, meaning that, you use your stencil, clean off your stencil. It won't have quite as much tackiness, but you probably can still use it a few more times after. Eventually you will have to reapply that pixie spray. But I really found it very helpful specifically for stencil number 3 right here, and also stencil number 1. These are the only ones that I needed to put pixie spray on. And then for this stencil in particular, to get really, really solid lines, I did a stippling motion with my blending brush just up and down on top of that stencil, and that really seemed to work well. So there are examples on the back of the packaging, and I've even included what colors I used for all of those plaids. I recreated a few of those, and I thought I'd show them to you now on cards, and there's actually one that's not on a card. So this first one is on lilac cardstock, and you can see that I've used 2 different stencils for this. There's the purple, and then I also have the thinner black line. and layered on top of that lilac cardstock. It looks really great. This sentiment is from the Festive Fun Stamp Set, which is in a different bundle, but it pairs really well with this one. This one right here is, it's actually using some distress inks. I discovered that when I was layering the plaid designs that the Concord and 9th inks are so strong, and they also have that smoothing agent in them to smooth out the ink, that sometimes they didn't layer as transparently as I would have hoped. So I switched to distress ink, which doesn't have any of those smoothing agents in them. And then the colors layered really, really well. Here's this pattern where I cut out the circle. You can see how those layer really well. So that's what I did for this one. I used distress ink for this. If you're wondering, this is the embossing folder from the September release from Concord and 9th, and I paired it with a greeting from the Love and Light dies and stamps that are from a different bundle in my release this month. All right, next up, one of my favorite plaids that I've created, and it's actually an example back here on the back, is this one right here. So I used poppy cardstock, and then I used a little bit of black soot distress ink. And then for the gold lines, I applied Versamark through the stencil. I stippled it on and then put gold embossing powder on top. These flowers and the sentiment are from the Pretty Poinsettias Stamps and Dies. And then as a last example, I just wanted to show you another plaid. Now, I basically recreated this plaid right here that's on the packaging, but in different colors. So look how cool this looks. I used distress inks. Like I said, I found that sometimes distress inks worked a little bit better. And for this, I used spun sugar, worn lipstick, and then seedless preserves. Some of my favorite pinks and purples. The Festive Fun Stencils, Dies, and Stamp Set all go together and they look really great. Now, please forgive me, my stencils are well loved and used. You'll see some examples here in a moment. So they don't look as pristine as I would have hoped, but because of this, you'll see some examples. So the stamp set has two really large greetings. They're nice and solid. And then there's this smaller greeting right here and heart. And then you have the die cuts or the dies to cut out those images. Now this large kind of wonky rectangle will cut out both of these. And then you have the dies that cut out that. And then you have an additional set of dies that just say Mary. And you can combine the Mary with other stamps you might have in your stash. So let's look at a few examples of this bundle in use. Here's this one. Now the stencil pack has 6 stencils in it, so you really get to have a very colorful color palette. So I used a bunch of really fun colors for the background for the pattern, and then I stamped the All the Joy and Cheer greeting and heat embossed it twice with white embossing powder and then die cut it. So, and it's just popped up. It's really easy. Now this little scallop edge around the outside, that was cut using the new Kristina's Essential Dies. There's a scalloped A2 sized die in there. So I just wanted to point that out. That's in another product that comes out in this release. This next one, I've got some really fun, colorful elements here. I've stamped that greeting and gold embossed and then die cut on some fig cardstock. And then these colors over here, I didn't think about it until after the fact, but they remind me of It's a Small World. It totally has that vibe, but really fun with those different colors. For this last one, I went for a monochromatic effect. I used watermelon cardstock with poppy ink. And then this is some powder cardstock, and then I've got that greeting right on top that's die cut out. Here's another card using that greeting, and I've done kind of a rainbow multicolor stamping effect going from lilac to fig to black. I wanted to point out that for some of the very intricate parts on this stencil set, for example, right here when you're going over this area or coming into, let's see here, right here where you've got the 2 lines right here, sometimes the stencil will want to move. So using a stippling motion up and down with your blending brush tends to help prevent the stencil from moving. You could also try a little bit of pixie spray on the back side of your stencil. The Love and Light stamps and dies are a joy to work with. You've got 3 different large die cut greetings. You have Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, and holidays. And then you've got 2 candles and 2 little flames. And I designed those specifically for when you're making the candles for Hanukkah or for Kwanzaa, which when I was designing this, I thought it was just perfect that both of these celebrations have similar imagery with their candles. So I'm going to walk you through a few cards I made using this stamp and die set. This first one is a Kwanzaa card, and I did the traditional red, black, and green, and then put Joyous Kwanzaa right there. And I have a couple of tips for how to use or how to line up the candles just right. So I'll include that right here. To get the candles lined up perfectly along the bottom edge, I cut a narrow strip of cardstock and put some glue on it. And then I very carefully applied the candles right on top, making sure to line up the bottom of each candle with the bottom edge of that cardstock strip. I'm using the grid lines on my glass mat as a guide to make sure all the candles are standing up straight. So I trimmed off the edges or the hangover of the white strip of cardstock, applied some dots of glue, and then moved that over to my card front. I've already marked the bottom spot where I want this placed on the card, and that allows me to get the whole group of candles onto the card in perfect placement, and then I can put my circle window over the top. So I used that method for the Kwanzaa card. And then for this Hanukkah card, I used a different method for getting all of these candles completely straight and lined up. In this instance, the full candle will be shown on the front of the card. On that first one for the Kwanzaa card, the bottom was concealed by that circle window panel. So for this one, I took a little bit of masking tape or Post-it tape. You could also use a Post-it note or anything like that, something temporary. And I aligned the candles face down onto the Post-it tape, lined them up using the grid mat or the grid on my mat, and then I put some narrow foam strips on all of the candles. And then I was able to pick up the whole grouping of candles all as one, flip it over, and then place it onto the front of my card, getting that nice and centered. You could also just try adhering everything based on that taller middle candle. Adhere that one first, and then adhere the candles on either side. Really simple Hanukkah card. I think it's just beautiful. And then for my last example, I took the holidays sentiment and I stamped and white heat embossed on some gold cardstock as well to finish out that greeting. And then I put that on top of some die cut flowers that I stamped and then colored in just a few little spots with some Olo markers. So that's from the Pretty Poinsettia stamp and die set. I think this is one of my favorite card designs that I did with the October release. I really love that one. And here's another example with the holidays and the 2 different sentiments coming off the top and bottom. Kristina's Essential Dies includes all of my most used dies and design elements, things that I use all the time in my crafting. So I'm going to point out some of these dies and then I'll show you an example of them cut. We've got this larger one, which is 5 by 7. The one just inside of that is your 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 or A2 card. Then you have a little wonky scalloped edge just inside that fits the A2 card. This circle right here, let's measure that so I can give you an exact measurement. It's 3 1/4 in size. I've also got a couple of my most used sentiment phrases. I've got hello and thanks. And then I've also got 2 sentiment strip dies. This one right up here is perfect for those really small 1-line sentiments. And then this one can be used for ones that are just a little bit larger. Down the side right here, I have a nice curved edge. It spans the entire length of a 5 by 7 card, past 7 inches. So you can use it to add like a curved line in a lot of different ways. And then I've included a bunch of hearts because I find myself adding little hearts to my cards all the time. I've got this big one right here, one that's a little bit smaller. And then I've got some different kind of designs of hearts, ones that are a little bit more chunky, ones that are more narrow. Just really depends on what heart you're looking for. And I've got that in various sizes. Up here, you're going to get 4, or I think in some cases 5 of the same heart cut out all at the same time. So I put together this example of all of these elements cut so you can see their size comparison and how they work. So I used that curved edge for this piece back here. This is 5 by 7. Here's your A2 card with that kind of scalloped kind of matting inside. I've doubled up and stacked the hello die as well as the thanks die. And then I've got my sentiment strips right there. I did want to point out that I used the sentiment strip die, the smaller one, for cutting out these sentiments on these cards specifically. You can see how easy it is to grab those. And on this card, this circle right here is from the die set, as well as I used that circle on this card as well. When it came to creating all of these backgrounds with my stencil, I made them on 6 by 6 pieces of paper, and then I used the A2 size die, the 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I used that to kind of position it over the pattern and cut out exactly what I wanted. So these really are some of the dies that I use most often. The other thing I wanted to point out on these larger dies here is that there's extra steel on them to prevent them from warping going through your die cutting machine. If you've ever used any of these like larger frame dies, over time you might have noticed that sometimes they can sort of skew and get a little bit warped in your die cutting machine. So having this extra steel on the die itself will make it much more sturdy and they'll last a lot longer. So that is the Kristina Werner with Concord and 9th October 2024 release. I hope you'll check them out. We've got things in bundles to save a little bit of money, and I can't wait to see what you all create.